I think everyone should be in.
Okay.
Um, if somebody could raise their hand and make sure they can hear us and just let us know. I can see it on yep. Okay, I can see everybody's raising their hand, so we're good to go.
All right, great. Thank you everyone for joining us. This is our Opto panel here, webinar to discuss this year's recruitment season. My name is Steve Fletcher. I'm the current Opto chair, and let me share some slides here. All right, great. That coming through okay? Good. So, sorry, there we go. Great. So again, my name is Steve Fletcher. I'm the Opto chair this year. We also have Eric Dobratz, Judy Liu, and Brett Comer who are joining us, and Rosemary Stocks may pop in as well. They're all Opto Council members. In this webinar format, just because of the size overall, we're going to ask to place questions in the Q&A. Some of those, if there's straightforward answers, our council members just might write a response as we're talking. And for any longer, any questions that have a longer response time, we'll have plenty of time at the end to go through that. We are recording this session, and we're going to make a recording of that available on our website. So any colleagues who aren't able to make it, feel free to send that information along. And thank you for joining us. So I do want to start with just letting everyone know that Opto, as well as SUO and ADO, have new management support. And that has resulted in some website upgrades, both some that have already occurred and others that will be occurring more. I do encourage you to go to our website. We do have a variety of recruitment-related information on there, as well as other information that will hopefully be beneficial to the group. I want to thank Beth, and Colleen, who are with us here today, for their partnership. And we really appreciate the increased responsiveness and activity. I think it's really going to benefit all of our organizations as we move forward. So for tonight's agenda, we're going to cover three primary topics. We'll go through interview format, virtual versus in-person, and share some data and information related to that. We will talk a little bit about preference signaling, and then we'll finish with some comments on this year's combined interview offer date plan. I'm hoping we'll finish this portion in less than half an hour and have plenty of time for a Q&A session after that. So with that, I will turn it over to Eric and the interview format section.
Thanks, Steve. So I guess just a quick kind of background. I mean, as you all know, we have followed kind of the AAMC recommendations about 4 years ago, right after COVID and kind of switching to virtual interviews, their recommendation. And so that was the first time we kind of put out a statement, a joint statement between OPDO, SUO, and ADO. Since then, for 2 years, the first 2 years, we kind of followed along with the AAMC recommendations. And then last year, we kind of strayed a little bit, and basically they continued to overall recommend virtual interviews with some kind of statements about, why they thought that would be the favorable approach for recruitment interviews. We kind of came out with a statement as our joint organization statement that kind of said, certainly look at that, consider it, but you also may decide, that it's more favorable for your program, and kind of with agreement of your institution to participate in in-person interviews. And so with that, last year, about 50% of our programs did in-person interviews and 50% did virtual interviews. So we thought in the OPDO that kind of represents a really unique population of students who have interviewed in both formats, which really has not been done to any significant degree before. And so we worked with the AAMC to put out a survey to all of the interviewees this year, all the applicants this year, and asked them to kind of give information about their perception of the various formats, in person and virtual, through their experience in interviewing this last year. We had a 40% response rate, or which, you know, for surveys is generally pretty good. We were hoping to try to get even higher, but we're pleased to get a 40% response rate in the survey. The survey went through a long list of questions. We're just really going to highlight essentially 2 of them here. But overall, there was a strong preference for in-person interviews by the interviewees. There was some, we had them kind of give some comments too, and there was some desire for cost sharing or financial support options during the interview process if they were doing kind of in-person interviews. Next slide, we have one of the survey results from one of the questions. And so one of the questions stated, considering all the pros and cons of the interview formats, did you have a preference? And the majority, with 72.4% of the respondents, had a preference towards in-person interview, with about 15%, 16% having no preference, and 12% for virtual. So really an overwhelming majority preferred the in-person interview format. And then the next slide, we have, we asked the question, did the interview format impact your ranking decision? And so actually almost 60% of the respondents said that their experience during in-person interviews made them want to rank in-person interview programs more highly. And only 3% doing virtual interviews felt that that format made them want to rank those programs more highly, where about almost 40% did not feel that the format had an impact on their rank decisions, still having a preference for the interviews in person overall. But even with that, about 60% actually stated that in-person interviews would cause them to rank those programs more highly. So considering all that data, our statement this year, you know, we had kind of thought about saying again for programs to decide, but I think some institutions, deans are really wanting stronger language for societies or specialties, more specialties to kind of give an indication. And so we said, you know, taking into account these data, we believe it's critical to allow otolaryngology programs the opportunity to conduct in-person interviews during this cycle. So hopefully you'll find that if that is your desire, based on this data, that this statement from our joint societies would be one that your deans would allow you to make that decision. The statement itself can be found on the website.
Great.
I think that's all I had.
Thanks, Eric. So I'm going to move on and talk a little bit about preference signaling. And mostly I'll talk about the background, and then Judy will talk a little bit about this year's plans. So again, background, I think is, as many of you know, this was initiated in the 2021 application cycle, the COVID year. And we modeled this after an economics group. We used a low signal approach the first year, 5 signals, went to 4 signals the following year when a sub-I rotation was added to the process, and then went to 7 signals after that before transitioning to 25 this past year. So overall, we've shown that signals do provide a marked increase in interview opportunities when there's a signal associated with an application. We've also shown that there's an improved distribution of interview offers across programs with signaling, and that the benefits of signaling carry across the various demographic groups. And just as background, here's the current state of preference signaling. After our initial year, several other specialties joined, and it's now gotten to the point where virtually every residency program in the country uses a preference signaling program. There is quite a bit of variation in terms of the number of program signals, and also several specialties that use tiered signaling, designated as the gold and silver here in this list. So I'm going to get to our first frequently asked question. Do I signal home and away programs? I think this is actually our only frequently asked question, but I labeled it number 1 anyway because I think it's important. So the answer to this is a very clear yes. So applicants are expected to signal home and away rotation programs unless the applicant chooses to prioritize other programs. So the bottom line is that this is really done for equity purposes, in that we do have a number of applicants who come from medical schools that don't have a home program, and also a lot of applicants whose opportunities to complete away rotations are restricted for a variety of reasons. And so the signals provide at least kind of some catch up for the loss of, for missing out on a home rotation or an away rotation. And so with that, if you have students who are rotating with you or your home students, they come up and ask you, hey, do I need to signal you? I've already shown that I'm interested by coming here, or, I'm clearly interested because you're my home program. The answer is yes, you should signal, because that's the rules of the program, and that's the way the system works most equitably. So now I'll turn it over to Judy. She'll talk a little bit about why we're going with 25 signals.
So thanks, Dave. So why we're going with 25 signals is that for the prior cycle in 2023, we saw that students had applied to an average of 86 programs. So that was when we had only 7 signals. So we found that it's very costly and inefficient, both for the student as well as for the programs. And by increasing to 25 signals, it was thought that there was the potential to decrease the applications submitted per student by decreasing the value of non-signal applications. And we really did see that kind of modeled by orthopedics, who had done 30 signals the year prior, even last year. So the potential to increase the number of programs that receive benefit from signal also seemed to be much better as we trialed that this past year. So if you go to the next slide. So this is a figure that shows that when we use the 25 signals in otolaryngology last year, the light blue is the number of applications that each program received. And you can see there are 123 programs included at the bottom, but that the number of program signals are shown in the darker blue. And they pretty much mirror the number of applications that each program received, but that they were more equitably distributed, so that almost all programs received a pretty similar number of signals. There's only a few more at one end that seem to have fewer. So it seemed like this worked better, not only for the students, but also for the programs. So, the other data that we had gotten, and this was preliminary as of December, before all the match information was in, is that of the applicants who sent in a signal, there was a median of 42% interview offers. So that if you as a applicant had sent in a signal, you were likely to get an interview offer from 42% of the time. But if you did not send a signal, then the interview offer is dwindled to about 2%. And of course, there's always a range. And this is not all programs, this is, but it's about half the programs who participated in this program. Go to the next slide. So again, why 25 signals? So this has a lot of data on it, and let me just unpack it a bit. So the yellow-orange data is the number of applicants that EROS sent to otolaryngology, but the number of positions offered is shown on the red dots. And so even though there's been a steady increase of positions offered in otolaryngology, it's still quite a bit less than the solid yellow. So for instance, last year in 2024, there were a total of 573 applicants total, but there were only 382 spots. So how did many applicants see this? They countered by sending in more and more applications per year. As you can see, that's the green line at the bottom. So starting from 2011, the mean number of applications was 49, but it had gone to a high of 86. Now and that was even then when we had the signaling. However, when we went to 25 signals, you can see that there was a 30% drop. So then the mean number of applications dropped to about 59. This also meant for programs had fewer applications to review. So that's in the blue. So you can look at the blue dots. You can see there's a bit of a roller coaster in terms of the numbers of applications each program received. But it went down to a mean of 258 per program, which I think is a much more manageable number to review, especially if you have a commitment to reading all of the applications seen. So generally, this is seen to be a positive both for the applicants having to put in fewer applications, but also for the programs having to review fewer numbers of applications. So next. So the take home is, with 25 signals, as Steve mentioned before, we do want all applicants to signal home and away rotation programs. But the important thing is that as a program, as your department, we want to also increase transparency for the applicants. So, if you feel that, you have sufficient numbers of applicants who are signaling you, you intend to really only look at applications from those who did signal you, you may want to say this first statement: we do not anticipate interviewing any applicants who do not send us a signal. On the other hand, if that's not where you think you're going to come, then it's important to communicate that as well, and anticipate that you will get applications from those maybe even more who aren't as interested, but maybe see you as an opportunity. For the future, we do hope that programs will report the range of signals that they received in the past year, and that the list of programs who received a range of signals will be distributed.
Great. Thank you, Judy. And we'll move on to Brett for our final topic here.
Okay, thank you, Steve. I want to cover the combined interview offer date for this cycle. This was started just a couple of years ago, modeled, I believe, after OBGYN and maybe a couple of others. So next slide. All right, so the plan is to coordinate the release of the interview offers at noon on November the 8th, and that will be a Friday. And the Veterans Day happens on the following Monday on the 11th. So the Opto Council made the decision to not start to schedule interviews until Tuesday the 12th at noon. All this is Eastern Standard Time. There is a request for programs to be on their honor in terms of don't send out more offers than you have for interview slots. And also it would be appreciated if attempt not to actually schedule interviews prior to the November 12th at noontime coordinated kind of release time. And then we're asking applicants not to hold on to conflicting interviews. I will tell you that anecdotally, talking to our medical students, talking to rotating medical students, talking to people we interviewed, this combined interview offer date was very much appreciated because it took some pressure off in terms of the applicants in terms of having to make quick decisions, and kind of gave them a weekend this past year to mull over their choices before making those decisions. And that's really all I have on that.
Great. Thank you, Brett. And I think we are ahead of schedule. So I will stop my share here and we'll move into our Q&A session. So looks like we have no open questions. So look at us answering everything along the way. So feel free to put any questions in the chat. We have, looks like a little over 40 people here. I think if you have a question that you think would be better answered and asked by speaking, feel free to raise your hand as well. So first question popped up. Judy, I'll put this out to you and then we can all chime in. How should applicants be advised to use their signals?
Yeah, that's one of the questions that I think we get all the time from the students. So I think because there are 25 signals that you should think carefully about which 25 programs that you really want to rank, that you really want to go to. That's a personal decision, so there's a lot that goes into it. Do you want to go to a big city, a small city, a bigger program, smaller program? Do you really have a preference in terms of part of the country? Are there family and friends that you want to be close to during your training? So that's our it's something that I think it does deserve a just detailed discussion with each student. And it is probably the hardest decisions that these applicants need to make. You guys have other thoughts you want to chime in on?
I think that's a great start. I think I would just add a couple of things. One is that starting with a list of what are the 25 programs that you're most excited about for whatever reasons are important to you. I think it's important for students to have mentorship through the process as well. And if they list, the top 25 ranked programs and their application strength is one that you worry about them matching, then I think you need to have a conversation with those individuals and say, I think we should look to broaden the types of programs we're looking at here, and here are some of my concerns, et cetera. So there is a little bit of counseling that needs to happen, I think, in terms of which programs are likely to see the applicant's submission and their application favorably. And that's hard, but I think it's an important step. The other thing I would say is that the data from preference signaling after doing this for several years show that students do pretty well with this, because if they weren't able to choose programs where their signals are important, we wouldn't see the strength of a signal in terms of resulting in interview offers. So there is always anxiety and concern, but I think there's a little bit of room for reassurance as well in terms of telling people telling applicants that everyone kind of worries about this and thinks about it. But overall, the system has been working well, and here are things you should think about. You've got a super strong application. You should just apply to the 25 programs you're most interested in, or here are the places where I think there's an opportunity that your application will be seen most favorably. You should think about these programs or these types of programs. All right. Combined date results in almost no movement off the wait list. Have you found this true in your programs? Brett?
Yeah, absolutely. And to me, that's kind of part of the point of it, is you're trying to reduce cost on everybody's part, whether it's time cost and reviewing application cost and trying to plan for things that may not happen, and then true financial cost in terms of number of applications. So that is absolutely true. I think last year we may have had one movement total, and kind of anecdotally talking to other program directors, that seems to be a trend.
Eric, do you follow that trend as well?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we had one last year, and before we did the common interview date, there was definitely more than that.
Yeah. Judy, same thing?
So we had a decent number of movement, but we also have two different tracks, one of being research track, and so we always anticipate there being some movement. We didn't have much movement on the clinical track, but definitely on the research track.
Yeah, I would say the same thing, that we've had very little movement over the past few years. I do think that signaling has a little bit of an impact too, and that when you're interviewing people who signal you already know they're interested in you. So I think there's a little bit of synergy there. Okay. Next question here. Is there a way to put a calendar together on which days the programs are planning on interviews to avoid conflicts in regional areas? The answer to that is yes. And we've actually been working with our administrative partners on putting that together. There should be more to come on that. That will be on our website, and we'll look to put that information out. So excellent question, and thank you.
Dr. Pletcher, this is Beth.
Yes.
I just want to say it is already on the website.
Oh my goodness.
So we can then send we can send a note out to everyone to, to the database, letting them know it's there. And then once we get the information, we will put a calendar together to put on the website. But the submission is there already, the link.
Yes, thank you. I told you our administrative team was more efficient, and there's a nice example of it right there. So thank you, Beth.
Can I just add to that real quick? So yeah, we talked about doing this calendar, and that's great. Thank you, Beth, for getting that up and running already. They have, through AutoMatch and other places, they have calendars too, but we just thought it would be important for kind of having a reputable source, from program directors themselves with the dates, but also, with the, to consider things down the road. Could we, if we're going to continue with in-person interviews, do some sort of coordination and stuff like that. That's well beyond where we're at now, but certainly getting more people to use the calendar would allow us to consider other options down the road. So I would just encourage all the program directors to very much use the calendar, so we can start to explore some other options to help make things more convenient for applicants and programs down the road.
Right. Next question we have here. Last year, applicants were not told to signal home program since the goal is to improve interview chances. Is there a problem with departments telling their own students not to, quote, waste the signal on the home program if there is a guaranteed interview? So the initial years of signaling, when we had 5 and 4 signals, the guidance was not to signal your home programs. When we transitioned to 7 signals, the reason we transitioned to 7 was there was no longer a restriction on the number of away rotations that applicants could complete. And so we transitioned to a recommendation to signal both your home and away rotations with those changes, and that included last year. So I think that because of all the changes, the messaging has been challenging, and that's why I put that in bold in the frequently asked question. The problem with telling students not to, quote, waste a signal on the home program is that disadvantages students who don't have a home program. And so that's why we want there to be a clear message to all applicants that if you're interested in going to your home program, you should signal your home program. And then I think that, same thing applies to away rotations that guarantee an interview.
I think too, looking longer term, it's important to realize that if we want to have accurate data, we need to have kind of a common way that this is done, so that we can advise students in their best interest over the long run in terms of the power of signaling.
That's a good point. And I think that the data that Judy presented, that 2% interview offer rate for applicants that don't signal a program, that isn't really refined data in that it doesn't pull out home applicants who didn't send a signal, or away applicants who didn't send a signal. So it makes it more challenging to advise applicants in terms of the number of total applications to submit. I think if we saw that number even lower by cleaning up the data a little bit, it would have the potential to bring down the total number of applications submitted even more. That I think would largely benefit the group. Okay, got another signaling question, but beyond the interview offer, does signaling correlate with matching at a signaled program? So I think that the question there is, after, once you've completed your interviews, is it more likely that you would match at a program that you signaled versus at a program that you didn't signal? We don't have great data on that other than survey response in terms of how programs consider signaling for interview offer time versus how they consider signaling when they're putting together their rank lists. And that data shows overall that programs use signaling significantly when making decisions on interview offers, but don't use signaling significantly when making decisions on ranking. So I think the general answer to that is no, it doesn't really correlate. The other kind of factors are that a home program and away rotation are much more potent signals in terms of match likelihood than the preference signal that's provided. Other thoughts or comments from the group there? All right. Any recommendation based on the data on geographic preference signaling this year? So geographic preference signaling, Judy, Eric, or Brett, did you guys use that at all?
So I don't think and the recommendation last year certainly was not to use the geographic preference signaling, at least from the student standpoint. I don't know how many program directors or programs actually use geographic signaling. I know that there were some students who used it. I think the stronger signal for most of us was preference signaling.
I think there was some data from previous years that if the preference signal, if you signal a program and you preference signaled a geographic area outside of that program, that actually hurt them as far as their signal was concerned. Isn't that correct, Steve? So
Yeah.
the general recommendation was to, unless you are going to have all your signals in certain geographic areas, to just say no preference, because the having them kind of be the opposite of each other actually hurt people as far as their percentages of interviews and signals.
Yeah, so I'll give my bias here. I really don't like having geographic preferences, including with preference signaling. First of all, the terminology gets confusing. And second of all, it just adds a level of complexity that I think is unnecessary. It makes it more challenging for applicants and programs to navigate the system. I think last year the AAMC didn't allow us to determine as a specialty if we wanted to use geographic preferences or not. If we were using their system then we had to use geographic preferences. So it wasn't really our choice. The data did show that if there was concordance between a preference signal and your geographic preference, then that was strong, but it was no stronger than if you said I don't have a geographic preference and sent a preference signal. If you didn't send if you sent geographic preferences to other regions, but your preference signal was discordant, then your interview offer rate dropped a little bit. So the general advice last year to applicants was, either say you don't have a preference geographically, which is the easiest option, or if all of your preference signals are within the allotted number of geographic regions, then you can signal those regions and there's nothing lost there. So that's what we I'm hopeful that this year geographic preferences will go away for us. Okay.
Let's see. ERS will continue to use geographic preference signaling, but the question is whether you yourself, your program wants to use it.
But I think they may allow us as a specialty to remove that question or that issue from the application. It's not, as far as I've heard, it's not totally decided yet, but I think there's an opportunity to remove that from the equation. So we would have just a pure preference signaling approach with no geographic preferences. All right, I'm going to call out Dr. Hoffer's "Our administrative team is the best." I will answer that one live and say you are correct. Thank you for that comment. Question from Dr. Eisenberg: as a mentor, is there a specific site that medical students can go to review all of the points you've made tonight and on the webinars regarding signals? Brett, comments or thoughts there?
Yeah, I'm not sure on that.
So we'll have the webinar tomorrow night.
Yes.
We do
that's
have
true.
one tomorrow, yeah.
Yeah. So there will be tomorrow night we have a webinar. We're basically using the same slides for students. So that's one thing. And then both this webinar and the student webinar will be recorded and posted on our website. So that will be there. And there is a variety of the data in the slides, and we can certainly post the slides from this talk to our website as well that they're welcome to review. Okay, Angela Donaldson, any analysis on small or newer programs? Did signaling have the same impact? Um, Judy, comments or thoughts? So I'm happy to give mine as well.
Yeah, so there was that slide with the 123 programs showing the number of applications and the number of signals. And you know, it doesn't show which programs are newer or smaller, but in general, all programs received around a little bit less than half, I think, of the total number of the number of applications that they received a little bit less than half of the signals. So that, again, that's an average, and that's just a gestalt. So it's really hard to say. I don't think we have more granular data than that. Do you know of any, Steve or Eric or Brett?
Yeah, no great data. I will say that anecdotally, in the first few years of signaling, there were some program directors who thought it was great. And then there was also, I would say, a fairly large group of program directors who said, yeah, it's sort of nice, but we don't get that many signals, and the signals we receive aren't really that from that many applicants who we're particularly interested in. So it hasn't really had an impact on our process. I think that changed significantly this past year when we went to a high signal approach, in that we've had a lot, that I think it just a lot more programs capture signals from applicants in whom they're interested in. So so I think that that's beneficial, but we don't really have clear data on. I'm not familiar with data on program size or like a new program. Do single applications have the same impact? We couldn't. I think we have some information. We have some data we could use to look at that, but we don't have any specific numbers. Okay. 6:08. Any closing comments from the panelists? Additional thoughts? Just say happy July 1st to everyone. It's either resident promotion or new resident start day for the academic year. Thanks for joining us, and I think we're all fairly easy to reach via email with any questions, or you can always feel free to reach out to the on our website with any questions. We'll have a general kind of Q&A button on there that we're always happy to get back to you. And as program directors ourselves, we appreciate all the time and effort that everyone puts into this process. So thanks for coming tonight, and hopefully we'll have a good successful recruitment application cycle this year. So thanks, everyone.
Also, just
Go
a
ahead.
plug to go to the SEO, AADO, and OPDO meeting in the November. That'll be in Phoenix, the weekend of, like, I think the 22nd or something like that of November.
Yeah, so it's the weekend before Thanksgiving this year, a little bit later in the year than some prior years. And I would definitely plug that, as well as anybody who's not a member of SUO. I think it's a great opportunity to sign up, to stay engaged, and certainly as a program director, that puts you into the Opto fold nicely as well. Okay, thanks everyone.